So the distance between a number and 0 on the number line is called the absolute value. Once again, it's just kind of these words that somebody named, and we just gotta accept it. So, for example, the distance between -3 and 0 is 1, 2, 3 hops. It's not negative hops, it's just 3 hops. The distance between 3 and 0, 1, 2, 3. Even though we're going to the left, it's still just 3 hops, right? It's I like to think about it like a little bunny. A bunny can't do negative hops. Things can't do negative hops. Distance is always positive. So I want you to look at page 355 and do numbers 1 through 4. They're pretty easy to do, so it shouldn't take you too long. Once again, the absolute value is always positive. The absolute value is always positive. Each mark on the number line indicates 1 yard. Draw a tree 3 yards west of the house. Where is that, Hannah? Yes, that is our tree. We draw our little tree right here. And stay up there, Hannah.
I'm trying. I'm short and hard.
I know. Now, draw a mailbox 3 yards east of the house. Where is that, Hannah? Yes, right there. So here's our little mailbox with its little red, there's some mail in there. Thank you, Hannah. So, the distance between the house and the tree is how much? How much would I have to walk to get to that mailbox or the tree? No, wait. The distance between the house and the tree is what? Ready? What's the distance between the house and the tree? Raise their hand, Miles.
3 yards.
Yeah, 3 yards. What about the distance between the house and the mailbox? 3 yards. Same thing. The tree and the mailbox are in what directions? Yeah, I think the book is looking for the word opposite or whatever. Yeah. Oh, and also, it was looking for the answer here is equal the distance, and they are in... Yeah, the book's phrasing is weird sometimes. So, and they're in opposite directions. So even though they're in opposite directions, our person has to hop 3 times. Yeah, he hops. He hops 3 times to get to the mailbox, and he hops the other 3 times to get to the tree. He hops. So it asks us this. How does the number line help you understand absolute value? Really, it's that the house is at 0 and that both are 3 away. The house is at 0 and both are 3 away. Even though they're at different distances, even though they're in different directions, they're still the same distance apart. They're still the same distance apart. So the distance between Hannah and Rocco is the same as the difference between me and Rocco, approximately, correct? Yeah, it's pretty correct. The difference between us is the same amount. Rocco would have to walk the same amount to get to either of us. Now, here's the thing. We write absolute value in a weird way. We write it with these 2 lines like that, these 2 straight lines, these 2 parallel lines. So, for example, if I was writing the absolute value of a number, I'd write the absolute value of 3. The absolute value of 3. That's how it would look. And that's because in math, we use different terms to distinguish things. Just like we use this term to mean multiplication now that we're all grown-ups. That's 3 times 9. We use this term to mean division, where we do 9 divided by 3. We use all these terms because now we're in big girl, big boy math. So this means X. We don't use that for times anymore. For example, the absolute value of 7 is 7. The absolute value of -7 is still 7. Because the distance between -7 and 0 is how much? How much is this distance? Rocco. It's 7. And how much is this distance? It's still 7. So, the absolute value of any number is going to be the positive value of that number. So, absolute value is always positive. It might help to write that. You don't necessarily have to. But absolute value is always positive. And that's because distance is always positive. Distance is always positive. So I got Oswaldo as our volunteer. Oswaldo, I want you to take 3 steps that way. 1, 2, 3. How many steps did he take? 3. Oswaldo, take 3 steps backwards. That's not backwards.
Backwards. Bro, moonwalk.
Let's see. Yeah, right? How many steps did he take?
4.
Same, whatever. But he didn't take negative steps. He still took positive steps. Even though he went in negative and positive directions, he still took both steps in a positive direction. He still took steps in a positive direction. Thank you, Oswaldo. You can sit down. As I've been saying, since distance cannot be negative, the absolute value of a number is always positive or 0. Because the absolute value of 0 is 0. And 0 is neither positive nor negative, which I think is silly because, I don't know, I consider 0 to be positive adjacent. Like, similar. So, I want you guys to do A and B on page 356. And then I want you to work on C, D, and E with a partner. So I want you to do A and B on page 356 first. This one's easy. What is the opposite of 3? Raise your hand. Elsie. -3. Exactly. Now this one just sounds a little bit weird, but what is the opposite of -2? Oswaldo? Yeah, -2. Exactly. Because what's the opposite of -2? 2. And then what's the opposite of that? -2. It's just a trick question. Use examples 3, 4, and 5 to solve C, D, and E. I highly suggest that you write the value underneath each absolute value to make your computations easier. Raising our hands. What's the absolute value of 14, Ben? 14. Congratulations. Now, this one's multi-step. What's the absolute value of -9, Raphael? 9. What's the absolute value of 3? What's the absolute value of 3? Lucy. 3. And then we add them so we get 12, right? Now, what's the absolute value of -8? What's the absolute value of -8, Madison? 8. What's the absolute value of -2, Michelle? 2. What's 8 minus 2? Nathan? 6. So, pretty easy stuff so far, right? Pretty easy stuff so far. Now, I want you to look at the guided practice. What's the opposite of 0? 0. There's no such thing as positive or -0, so it can't do that. What's the opposite of 6? 6. Now, I want to see, what is the absolute value when we see those lines? It means absolute value. What's the absolute value of -5? Michelle? 5. What's the absolute value of 20 minus the absolute value of -3? Andrew? Let's check it. 20 is the absolute value here. This is 3. We have a subtraction sign, so we get 17. Excellent. Now, hold on. Melanie, what's the answer for number 5? Let's see. This is 16 plus this turns 12. We get 28. Exactly. So, let's look at this one. What's the absolute value of 3? 3. But we have this minus on the outside. So it becomes -3. Now, here's the thing. The only time an absolute value can produce a negative number is if the negative is on the outside. If the negative is on the inside of the absolute value, it's positive. But if the negative's on the outside, it's negative, right? Because like we saw in our earlier problems, we saw absolute value of 31 minus the absolute value of 1. What's the absolute value of 31? We saw this on our homework. What's the absolute value of 31? Who can raise their hand and tell me? Matthew. 31. What's the absolute value of negative 1? Rafi. 1. And we see that minus between, right? Let's just pretend I took away that 31, right? Notice how we still get that negative 1? Exactly. The only case is if the negative is on the outside of the absolute value. Let's look at this problem. We always start kind of in the most inner because just like when we're doing our parentheses, we start in the most inner. So, first, what is the absolute value of negative 3? What do we get? 3. But we're still within this absolute value here, right? So now we have this. Hey, again, what's the absolute value of negative 3? 3, right? But we're still within another absolute value. So now, what's the absolute value of negative 3 again? We get 3, but we have that negative on the outside, so it becomes negative 3. Here's the thing. Here's the easy solution. Here's the easiest way to look at it. Here's the easiest way to look at it. If anything is in any amount of absolute values, if anything is in any amount of absolute values, no matter what's in it, it always comes out positive. And then we have that outside, so it just makes it negative 3. You could have 100 absolute values in a row, and as long as there's no negative on the outside, it's positive. If there's a negative on the outside, it's negative. Simple as that. Elsie asked, why is the absolute value of an answer never negative? And that's because absolute value is used to measure distance. It's used to measure the distance from 0. And our distance from 0 is never negative because distance is always positive. If we're taking the number of steps from 0, it's still a positive amount of steps. It's still a positive amount of hops. It's still a positive amount of anything. So absolute values, all it's saying, the absolute value means distance. Absolute value means distance. The homework. If A and B are integers and A is greater than B. So let's say A is 2. What can B be? 1. So then let's look. Absolute value of 2. Absolute value of 1. What's the absolute value of 2? 2. What's the absolute value of 1? Hey, that works, right? Now, I'm going to give you guys a different situation. What if A is negative 3? What if A is negative 3? What could B be?
Negative 2.
No, negative 2 is not less than negative 3. What could it be, Hannah? Negative 5. Because negative 3 is greater than negative 5. So then let's look. The absolute value of negative 3. The absolute value of negative 5. What's the absolute value of negative 3? 3. What's the absolute value of negative 5? 5. Is 3 greater than 5? No. So, the answer is sometimes. The answer is sometimes.